Hello there, Byakamizu desu and welcome to my review of Like a Dragon Ishin. So it's been a while since the game has come out, but the game is really huge, be it because I want to do every side quest that I find, or because the main story is actually pretty long. So I had a lot of stuff to explore in this game, the story to get to know, and yeah, it took me a while because in the middle of that I was also playing other games, as you have seen other reviews come out. So yeah, it was a very busy time. Like a Dragon Ishin, so it's a spin-off of Yakuza games. It has the same name as the latest Like a Dragon, which has Ichiban as its protagonist, but that is one I have not yet played, and this Like a Dragon is actually focused on the characters that we know through the Yakuza series. So Kiryu is the protagonist, but not Kiryu. So Saito Hajime, not Saito Ryoma Sakamoto. So we will talk about Kiryu that has two different names, and this is actually a story. It's a Yakuza spin-off, but it's actually based on a real story from Japan. So Sakamoto Ryoma was a person that actually existed. Of course, you cannot take the game literally because you know how Yakuzas are. It's really over the top in the way that it does things, and Kiryu is a beast, and so is Sakamoto, even though the actual real person that it's based off was someone exceptional in the art of the sword. Kiryu makes it ridiculous, really, in the way that he does things. So this is actually really interesting because even though it's based in a real story, it takes the characters that we recognize from the other games. So actually, my real struggle with this game was memorizing the characters' names, because I just see the faces I know from Yakuza, and I'm like, do you really want to call them other stuff? So I will probably edit the video to correct the names so you can know who they are supposed to be, because I will call them by the names that I know from Yakuza. I mean, Kiryu will be the exception because he's the protagonist, so Sakamoto Ryoma, Saito Hajime are names that stuck with me, but Majima, Saejima, I cannot for the life of me remember what were their names, and even while I was playing I would always call them the names of the characters in the Yakuza series. So bear with me. Gathering more or less what the story is about. Of course, this is based off real events, so this has a very specific time and place in Japan. We are in the samurai era, and we are actually in an era where there was a hierarchy, and Japan was fighting against that hierarchy because you have samurai, but then the samurai have different levels. The names I cannot remember them. You have these different levels, and it's basically a corrupt system because samurai, who were supposed to be this representation of honor and the authority, like a kind of police of the time, they are actually corrupt and they abuse the power that they have. You can see samurai walking down the street and everyone has to stop and just watch them march down the street as they go. And if you don't bow your head while they are passing by, you have, of course, Sakamoto Ryoma is introduced to us in this manner. You have a mother with a sick child that refuses to bow because she's in a really urgent situation where she's going to get some medicine because her child is at risk, and she refuses to just stop for these samurai to walk by, and they beat her up. They completely disregard her situation, and of course, Kiryu being Kiryu, or Ryoma being Ryoma, he decides to step up to the samurai, calling them corrupt, saying that they do not serve the people as they are supposed to be. They only care about themselves and about their position. And of course, he defeats them in a fight, but this will have consequences for Ryoma, and he will end up in prison. Kazama, can't remember what's the name of in the game. I can't. I'm sorry. Kazama is Ryoma's adoptive father, and he will take him out of the prison because he also has a very important position. And Kazama, having the same curse as he had on the Yakuza series, he ends up murdered. And of course, Ryoma was at the scene, and he ends up being the prime suspect. And of course, to make matters worse, he decides to run away because he's going on this demand to find who the real killer of Kazama was, and he's also hiding because he doesn't want to be arrested. He's also hiding, and he changes his name, and he also creates this persona. So Sakamoto Ryoma ends up living for the most of the game as Saito Hajime. And there's a really funny moment where Sayajima is asking for his name, and he says the name, and he's like, dude, couldn't you come up with a better name? And I was, Sayajima can see right through Kiryu's lies. But apart from that, so he goes to another city, starts his life over, and he creates this persona of someone that indulges in alcohol, really indulges in the nightlife kind of style. And he's just staying at this inn where I cannot remember the name of the main manager of the inn, but it's Romi Paku giving her the voice, and the characters are beautiful, beautiful. The girl, I also don't know her. I assume it's from a Yakuza I haven't played yet. I'm now on Yakuza 5, so let's see if I discover who she is. And yeah, you have this very interesting story where he's trying to hunt down the killer. He was masked, he faced him in a fight and lost marvelously. So he knows that the killer of Kazama is someone that is very known in the Tenen Rishin technique, which is a specific sword fighting technique. That he couldn't defeat because it's so out of the box, so different from what he's used to. Even though he's a great swordsman, he wasn't able to just be on the same level of this swordsman. And yeah, he will try to join the Mibu Wolves. So these are a group of samurai that basically command the city, but it's actually kind of weird because they are ruthless. They kill anyone that tried to leave the organization. So even though if they are fellow samurai, they kill them. Actually, Ryoma, Saito, after joining the Mibu Wolves, he has to go through a test, which is done by Sayajima. So, and I will tell you, that fight with Sayajima, it's terrible. I had to do it. I don't know if I needed to grind or something, but I'm kind of stubborn, so I didn't do any grind. But that fight, I had to do it like 3 times for me to win against Sayajima because he's a beast. Jesus, it was so difficult, and it's actually kind of funny to see how not realist the game is. This is like Demon Slayer. They are able to have techniques where they launch lightning, fire, you know, those sword techniques where they just launch powers. You are also able to do that with Ryoma. So yeah, just so you can see, and that makes the fight so much worse because whenever they release the special techniques, it's a headache. But moving on, he joins the Mibu Wolves, he does jobs with them, and he's really torn because Ryoma, you know Kiryu, he's really, he doesn't want to kill anyone. I don't know how he does that fighting with a sword, but that's not well on that. He doesn't want to kill anyone, and he's really against this policy where, you know, he's a traitor, you cannot let him just get away. it's really difficult for him to agree with this policy. And of course, you will also have, you will meet the different members. You will recognize, of course, for anyone that has played the entirety of the Yakuza series, they will recognize a lot of people. Some of the characters I'm only now recognizing after playing Like a Dragon, because I'm playing now Yakuza 5, and I'm recognizing some of the characters that they put there and I didn't know before. But the Meeple Wolves, you have Mine being the leader of the organization. You have Kuze. Kuze was actually is one of the villains because he's working. He wants to take the place of the leader, which isn't Mine. It's actually a character from Yakuza 7. He's an amazing character to get to know because the leader. You think that the leader of the Meeple Wolves, which is revealed later on, may be someone very suspicious. But he actually has a very interesting code and he's trying to protect the organization, the things that they stand for, and it's really a very interesting story. You have Majima, of course, you have a lot of different characters and they have different positions. You can see that there is, even within the organization, there's a separation, different ideals coming into shock with one another. You are able to reveal the murderer of Kazama, which was, and I was kind of seeing that coming, was actually one of the characters, the leader of Kazama's family, the one that we see in Yakuza 0, and but he was actually not the culprit because he was hired by Ryoma's Kyodai. And I was really surprised with Ryoma's Kyodai, Takeshi, because he's played by a character that is actually the villain of Yakuza Kiwami, if I'm not mistaken. You know, as you have Kuze, he's supposed to be the final boss. He's part of the trio. And I was so confused when he appeared, and then I understood, of course, because he's a bad guy. He ends up being the bad guy. You also have, you know, Haruka's father is actually the main villain, the politic. Once again, he plays the same boring role we saw in the Yakuza series. He's this politic that is not really a threat for the entirety of the game, but he's the one in the shadows just commanding everything. And you basically confront him about the whole situation. It's kind of anticlimactic. That was maybe one of the parts that I enjoyed less, because it's like, oh, I'm the big bad guy, and I'm like, no, the big villain was Takeshi. I cannot take you seriously. I cannot. So yeah. And you have so many characters, so much stuff happening in the story. It's one of those things where you really have to see for yourself. You have Ryuji. Ryuji is on one of the factions that is fighting here. You have Akiyama, who represents yet another faction, and Ryuji and Akiyama are really bumping heads. You have this really, that moment just puts a smile in your face, because Ryoma changed history by being drunk and by convincing Akiyama and Ryuji to stop fighting and just drink together. And then they both take Ryoma home to the inn. And, you know, it's just amazing. Of course, Akiyama has the beautiful Hana-chan working for him, and you also have a very creepy moment with Hana-chan. So sorry for Hana-chan to have to experience that. But the story is just, it's one of those stories where it's really complicated, especially when they bring you words like Bakuhu, some of the organizations at the time, the politics, because you also have these foreigners plot where, you know, the English, the American, I'm not sure which one, are selling weapons, creating conflict within Japan. And you also have a lot of foreigners that you come into contact in side stories that are actually trying to help Japan to end the inside war that is happening. And yeah, it's just a lot of historic stuff. And like I said, for me it was a little, because I enjoyed the story, I did enjoy it, but it's so big with so many concepts, because I'm not really familiar with Japan's history. So it's a lot of words and organizations and names, and I'm always going back to, I recognize that character from that game and from that game, and it's a little bit confusing in that sense. But the story is great, and I was always waiting to see what would happen next. So yeah, you have a very huge development of Ryoma's character. The other characters are a little bit, it's more about the plot twists about them than the really development of the character, but Ryoma's character is really the focus, and he's really well developed. As for the gameplay is similar to what you have played so far, but now Kiryu slash Ryoma deals with weapons. So he still has a fighting technique where he just uses his punches, and Komaki is in this game to actually be able to, for you to be able to unlock new techniques. But you have then the style, which is the sword fighting style, you have the gun fighting style, and you have the sword and gun fighting style. So punch, sword, gun, and sword and gun. And for me, the one I would use the more is really the sword fighting style, because I mean, Ryoma was a swordsman, and you see that the best fighting style to use is really the swordsman, because it's the more balanced in terms of damage, speed, defense. I feel like it's the best one. Of course, if you have long distance enemies, the gun would be really helpful, but it leaves you very open. The sword and gun would be interesting if you wanted more speed, because it's like he's doing a dance. But it's for very specific situations. The fist fighting was also pretty nice, but it doesn't make sense for you to be punching dudes that have spears and swords all the time. For me, it's the sword. That should be the base. Sometimes you switch styles because, of course, they have their advantages depending on the situation. But yeah, here you have another rhythm game. So, of course, you have karaoke, and it's actually really fun because you can go to karaoke with Saejima, Majima, Hana-chan, and Haruka. So, yeah, Haruka is also in this game, and you actually have another life with Haruka. So Haruka has basically lost both her parents, and she's about to lose her home because she has no way, her parents were in debt and she has no way to pay it back. But Kiryu steps up, and he offers to pay the debt that she has, so she can keep her house, while he suggests, since he's paying, that he can also sleep there, have that house as kind of hideout for him, and you grow stuff there, you do a cooking mini game. It's actually a lot of fun, and you also have a few special cutscenes in certain moments, and you have a friendship to develop with Haruka. The problem here is, I mean, for me it was natural because I saw the Yakuza game series, and for me seeing Kiryu and Haruka interact, you know, you are just in the mood for Oji-san and you get it. But in the context of the game itself, it's just creepy. Imagine a stranger just coming up to pay your debt, and he's like, yeah, I'm gonna live with you inside that house. Yeah, not the best way to do it. But it's really interesting to develop the relationship with Haruka, being able to fully pay her debt, seeing the cutscenes, although sometimes they also are a little bit awkward because they seem too intimate for people that are supposed to be strangers to one another. She also has the orders for you to be able to get more money, and trust me, money isn't a problem in this game. There are some expensive places to eat and all that stuff, but money isn't a problem with all the things that you can do in another life. But yeah, the karaoke has a lot of music and it's a ton of fun to play with the different characters because Majima has his own version of a song, Saejima the same. It's really interesting to see these special versions for the characters. You also have another rhythm game that they made available on this game, which was the Buyo dance. And I actually had a lot of fun with that. It's not as intuitive as the karaoke minigame, but it's still a lot of fun. The only thing I thought it was a little bit tiring was the relationship with every single store. You can't imagine, the map is huge and you have a lot of places to visit, but it's so tiring at each time I went to eat at a new place, suddenly you have built a friendship with name of the store. And I was like, people, there's so much, and it would happen for most of the stores. You have so many friendships to fill up, and the side quests are so many. I didn't go through the trouble. I think I completed a few friendships, especially the ones that were with people and not with stores, for you to be able to see an extra side quest. But too many relationships, really. They did that in Fist of the North Star, and they thought, oh well, let's put this here. But it's too much, really, too much. The soundtrack is amazing. They're using traditional Japanese instruments for most of the soundtrack. It's just awesome. It's dramatic when it needs to. It's also awesome and epic in fights. The soundtrack, Yakuzas are very strong on the soundtrack part, and once again they were able to nail Bakamitai. Bakamitai with traditional Japanese instruments is awesome, just beautiful, I swear. So yeah, share here in the comments what are your thoughts, what you think are the pros and cons of this game, what you think. If you thought, some people thought that it was a very big game or maybe a boring one. I say it's a very enjoyable game. I did have a lot of fun. I spent a lot of hours on this game. I played it in normal mode. I love Ryoma's story. I really enjoyed the part where he was traveling to meet, I think it was the emperor or some high figure of Japan, and he was trying to, he took a letter from the leader of the Mibu Wolves, and he decided to add some stuff to that letter because he just wants equality and he wants to put an end to the senseless inside war that is raging on Japan. And those morals and ideals that he carries are really inspiring. So yeah, tell me what you thought. Tell me who is your favorite character. If you thought that the story was confusing, if you know the real history of Japan related to this and you want to share in the comments, I'm always willing to learn more. So thank you so much. And if you want to check what I'm playing right now, you can always check my Twitch channel. And if you want to support me, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and I hope to see you on the next game. So may music always be your life force.